Well, the first thing to consider is that the crop doesn't care what the price of fertilizer is or the price of the grain is. It needs the nutrients it needs.
If you want to grow a certain yield of corn or soybeans, whatever it is, then you got to establish that and then determine how many nutrients. Then you got to figure out if that would pay for itself or not before you do anything else.
And so if you figured out those nutrients, you got to figure out, well, what are your sources now? Maybe we need to consider things that we haven't always considered. Maybe we need to go back to our irrigation water and say, is there something else in there other than nitrate that I'm taking? Do I get sulfur in there? Do I get some sort of other nutrient, or is there manure around that I could source for fertilizer purposes? Start looking for alternatives, maybe.
Well, another thing that I think about once in a while, I see all these bales rolled up on some of the corn stalks, and those are nutrients that are going out of the field. So if you're taking nutrients out in form of hay or straw or whatever it might be, then those nutrients need to come back some way, and either in fertilizer or the animal manure wherever they went. So always consider the whole package of nutrients.
So that's probably a good point, that if you're looking to make extra revenue per acre, the last thing you need to be doing is say, hey, I'm going to go roll up some bales of corn stalks or roll up some soybean residue to make a few extra dollars. You might be doing even more harm to your future fertility budget than, especially when prices are tight and you are needing to make the appropriate budget.
So the rate, how much fertilizer you put on, or the rate of fertilizer you put on is got to be based on what's in the soil. So when we talk about these things, the first thing I think about is, what's the soil have? What's the soil test say?
And from a cost perspective, that's probably the cheapest thing you're going to do on that field on a per acre basis.
If you can't afford the soil test, you sure can't afford to put any fertilizer on. And if you don't need the fertilizer, then the soil test is going to pay for itself. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
But good things to consider this year when prices are maybe not the way we want them to be.
That's the nitrate test on the surface is fine, but we really ought to have a nitrate test down to 3 feet, especially as dry as it got here later in the summer. I think we probably have some carryover nitrate that is going to be available for next year. So that's going to be important. But we want a 0 to 8 inch sample for phosphorus and potassium and the other nutrients, and then 8 to 24, 8 to 36 inches for the subsoil nitrate. They advertise that Ray Ward says you don't put more fuel in the tank when the tank is full, meaning when the soil test is high, don't put any more fertilizer on. But as the tank gets down, if we got half the tank in the car, that seems like, well, we only got so many miles left. But in the soil, there's so many nutrients in the soil that keeps supplying out that we never run out. So at half tank or half a level, you may not have a yield loss yet. So it's a little bit different than the car. But so always kind of remember that if we're getting low, so we can cut that soil test off a lot lower than what we have been and still get by.
You got to make sure that you monitor it, because if it is getting low, there is a tipping point where you've gone too far and then it's really reduced and then you have no option. If you want to maintain yield, you've got to spend the money on the fertilizer. There is no alternatives at that point.
And our fertilizer recommendation has always been kind of on the high side. You put some phosphorus, potassium stuff on if it's a certain level, because when you get a bad year like right now economically, we can get by without any phosphorus and potassium and still not hurt our yield because we've been fertilizing up to a little higher than maybe where we should have been. So I got this built into the program already, and I don't feel bad about a guy cutting off on fertilizer if he really has got a high enough test. So we can really help, I think, in evaluating how much fertilizer do you need to spend this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The recommendation is made based on the yield goal. So if you say, I'm going to expect less yield because I don't want to spend the money on fertilizer, you just have to indicate that. Usually you go for 280 bushel corn. Let me budget out to see what 250 bushel corn would cost. And you might see the lower recommendation number, or you should, and then you can go from there. So on our submittal sheet, we have room for 3. And I know on the CSV report, there will be 3 crops and 3 yield goals on there. But if you ever want to change, give us a call. We can change it, update, and reissue those reports for you.
Well, if you lower the yield goal 20 bushel, you'll lower the nitrogen recommendation 22 pounds. If you lower 20 bushel in phosphorus, you'll lower the phosphorus recommendation by 5 pounds. So it's not a whole lot of difference in that to try to do those things. And it's better to do all those things, put the fertilizer on properly at the right time. And that right time is when the crop needs it, not when you want to put it on. And do the timing it, all that. And I think you get the efficiency and you can reduce without having to hurt your yield any.
Well, maybe you just said it right there, that if you reduce your yield goal by 20 bushels and you only cut the rate by 5 pounds of P2O5, your problem then is not the fertilizer rate. It's just the economics of production.
Right.
You're not going to save your way into prosperity here.
We're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur. We can make sure we got our sulfur's adequate. We've got to have adequate zinc. Well, I know a lot of our soils, there's high in zinc now, but zinc. And then another one that we need to think about, or I need to think about, is manganese. I don't know about it, and then boron. So always consider all those in your fertilizer program too, because if there's a micronutrient that's low and hurts the rest of the yield, then the economy won't work either.
I guess it's not simple.
We think it is. Well, good luck. It's the one thing, and I just think it's going to be a great year when it starts raining.